When you hear the word Viking, what comes to mind? Most people instantly picture fierce warriors charging into battle, their longships slicing through icy northern seas, villages burning in the distance, and of course, men with long beards wearing those famous horned helmets. The image is so common, so deeply embedded in our culture, that it feels impossible to question. But here's the shocking truth. Everything you think you know about Viking helmets is a myth. For centuries, we've imagined Vikings with horns curving out of their helmets, charging fearlessly into combat. You see it everywhere. In cartoons like Hagar the Horrible, in Hollywood blockbusters like How to Train Your Dragon, in video games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, even in the logo of the Minnesota Vikings football team. The horned helmet has become the ultimate symbol of Norse warriors. It's intimidating, dramatic, and let's be honest, it looks pretty cool, but it's also completely wrong. So where did this image actually come from? To find the answer, we need to jump not to the Viking Age, but to the 19th century, more than 800 years after the last Viking raids. This was the era of the Romantic movement in Europe, a time when artists, writers, and composers loved to dramatize history. They weren't interested in facts. They wanted spectacle, emotion, and drama. The turning point came in 1876 with the premiere of Richard Wagner's opera cycle, Der Ring des Nibelungen. This legendary performance told stories of gods, heroes, and warriors loosely inspired by Norse mythology. The costume designer, Carl Emil Duepler, wanted the Viking characters to look larger than life. His solution was simple: put massive curved horns on their helmets. The audience was dazzled. The look was striking, theatrical, and unforgettable. From that moment on, the Viking with horns was born, not from archaeology, but from opera costumes. Painters and illustrators quickly followed. Throughout the Romantic era, they depicted Vikings as wild, almost supernatural figures. They added flowing cloaks, oversized weapons, and yes, horned helmets. It didn't matter that this was historically inaccurate. What mattered was creating an image that inspired awe. A plain iron cap was too boring. Add horns, and suddenly you had a warrior who looked like a mythological beast. This is how the horned helmet fantasy spread, from stage to paintings, from paintings to books, and eventually into movies and TV. But what does the evidence actually say? Archaeology paints a very different picture. Despite centuries of excavation across Scandinavia, only one complete Viking helmet has ever been found. It's known as the Geirmundbu helmet, discovered in Norway in 1943. And when it was pieced together, archaeologists found something simple, practical, and effective: a rounded iron helmet with a guard to protect the eyes and nose. No horns, nothing fancy, just solid, reliable protection. Other helmet fragments tell the same story. Viking helmets were designed for survival, not spectacle. They were made of iron if you were wealthy, or leather and thick cloth if you were not. Most Viking warriors probably didn't even own helmets. They relied on their shields as their primary defense. Helmets were rare, expensive, and highly valued. So why waste precious iron on horns that made no sense in combat? And think about it logically. Horns on a helmet would have been a disaster in battle. They'd catch enemy blades. They'd throw off your balance. They'd give opponents something to grab. Instead of making you more powerful, they would make you more vulnerable. Vikings were anything but foolish. They were practical, efficient, and ruthless. Their armor reflected that. Everything they carried was designed to help them survive, not slow them down. Now that doesn't mean horned helmets never existed at all. Archaeologists have found ceremonial helmets with horns, but these come from much earlier periods, centuries before the Viking Age. During the Bronze Age across parts of Europe, Ritual helmets with horns were used in religious ceremonies. Carvings and statues show leaders or priests wearing them, likely as symbols of power or as a way to imitate animals. But these helmets were never worn in battle. They were ceremonial, not practical. By the time of the Vikings, this tradition was long gone. So, what did Vikings really look like if not the horned monsters of our imagination? They wore plain iron helmets if they were lucky enough to afford one. They dressed in wool and leather, layered for warmth in the harsh northern climate. Wealthier warriors might wear chainmail, but most relied on padded tunics for protection. Their shields were round, made of wood, painted with bold designs that could intimidate enemies. And their appearance? Long hair, often braided, thick beards, sometimes decorated, their faces marked by sun, sea, and battle. They didn't need horns to look fearsome. Their very presence was enough. Now, if we know all this, why does the myth of the horned helmet refuse to die? The answer is simple. Pop culture loves it. Once Wagner's operas popularized the image, it was picked up everywhere. Early films used it. Illustrators kept drawing it, and Hollywood made sure it stayed alive. By the 20th century, the horned helmet was the global shorthand for Vikings. Today, it's on costumes, souvenirs, sports logos, and tourist trinkets. Even though historians have shouted for decades that it's wrong, the myth is simply too strong. People expect Vikings to have horns, and when reality doesn't match the fantasy, it's the fantasy that wins. But here's why it matters. Myths like this change the way we see history. When we imagine Vikings as horned, almost monster-like figures, we reduce them to caricatures. We forget that they were real people, farmers who grew crops, traders who traveled as far as the Middle East, explorers who reached North America hundreds of years before Columbus. Yes, they were raiders and warriors, but they were also settlers, builders, and shipwrights. They shaped history in ways that echo even today. The horned helmet myth strips away their complexity and turns them into fantasy villains. The truth is far more interesting. Imagine standing on the coast of England in the year 793, the day of the infamous raid on Lindisfarne. Out of the mist, sleek longships appear, moving swiftly across the waves. The warriors on board are armed with axes, swords, and round shields. They leap onto the beach with terrifying speed, their shouts echoing across the shore. Their helmets, if they wore them at all, are plain iron. Their cloaks whip in the wind. Their eyes burn with determination. No horns, just raw power, discipline, and fearlessness. That, more than any costume, is what made the Vikings so terrifying. So, did Vikings really wear horned helmets? The shocking truth is no. The horned helmet is not a Viking artifact. It's a 19th century invention, born on an opera stage and spread by artists, Hollywood, and pop culture. It is one of history's greatest costume mistakes. But it is also one of the most enduring. Even today, centuries later, it shapes how we imagine the past. Next time you see a Viking with horns, whether it's in a cartoon, a movie, or a souvenir shop, remember, you're not looking at history, you're looking at theatre. The real Vikings didn't need horns to inspire fear. Their ships, their weapons, their strategies, and their courage were more than enough.